years ago, I got to spend a particularly cool evening in Cape Town when a still relatively unknown chef called Luke Dale Roberts was opening a completely unknown restaurant called the Potluck Club with a format that was still very new for the South African dining audience. It was small plates, this in a country where we traditionally like big hefty plates full of lots and lots of food. Instead, all these tiny little bespoke offerings. But it didn't take too long for the Potluck Club to catch on and for the magic of it to ensure it was a firm favourite with diners not just in the Cape but from all over. Luke Dale Roberts' star ascended very quickly, becoming through the test kitchen one of the best known South African chefs, one of the best known chefs on the continent, and since then his empire has continued to expand. And just as I was at the opening night of the Potluck Club, so I got to attend the opening night of the Potluck Club Johannesburg, the second opening of this really cool small plate outpost. And so that's where I find myself for this week's show, checking in on a brand new restaurant and sampling not just the food and the very cool cocktails, but also having a look at the wine list. And given the history of the group with people like Tinashe Nyamudoka guiding the wine, you know you are in for something special. So exploring potluck is big on today's agenda. It's not the only job I've got today. I've got two other introductions to make. A little later on in the show, we're heading out to Elgin and the cool climate celebration of wine that's found particular favour with some Belgians. Almenkerk is an estate I know well, and they've got wine that's won plenty of awards and has got a particular connection to the Potluck Club. But before we do that, a very good friend of mine, somebody who is an icon of modern South African winemaking. A number of journeys he's taken have led him out now to Hermanus, where Kevin Arnold finds himself hanging out with Chris Alheit and adding the latest instalment to this chronicle of great wine that he's made. So here's Kevin Arnold, his story and what lies ahead, while I go and find out if they really make a Thai green cocktail at the Potluck Club. For the better part of half a century, one of the most prominent winemaking figures in Stellenbosch was a guy by the name of Kevin Arnold, and if you've ever had a bottle of Shiraz, there's a pretty good chance he was the man behind it, one of South Africa's most iconic wines in the last couple of decades. But now Mr. Arnold has got a new adventure kicking off in a very different part of the world, and so in the Hemel-en-Aarde Valley, I find Kevin Arnold. Good to see you, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a great change, but what a great move. My wife and I moved into Hermanus a year ago, and it's just been incredible to live so close to the vineyards and so many passionate guys in the Hemel-en-Aarde. It's been great to connect with Chris here at Hemel-en-Aarde, and a new venture under the family.
It adds a slightly different chapter to the many that have come before in this storied career of yours, which kicked off a long time ago. Take us back to the very beginning and how Kevin Arnold, this kid from Plet, became a winemaker.
Yeah, it's a long story, but also a short story. In good old student days in Stellenbosch, I kind of bumped into Tussenberg, and I think it got the better of me as a student. And it wasn't long when I found myself asking the guys in a building nearby what the hell they were doing, and they explained to me that they were busy making wine, and that was at Elgin Agricultural College. And it wasn't long after that that I realized, but this is an incredible profession to be in, because you get to stand outside in the sun while everybody else is sitting in class and being taught how to farm sheep and apples and apricots. Yeah, within the year I attempted to change my course from general agriculture to wine, and I was told that I wasn't allowed to because I didn't come from the Western Cape. So be it. So I took the challenge on, and I said, okay, well, I'll show you guys that I do want to do that. And eventually, in my second year, they allowed me to study wine. So it was by chance that I got into it. But I guess it's all the things, the smells, the aromatics of the harvest time, the incredible people that involved in the wine business. It kind of soon just showed me that there was more to wine than just growing and making, so much more. And that's the journey I've been on.
Fast forward a few years from that studying process, what was the first vintage you made? Where was it? And what are your memories of having that first bottle of wine that you'd made yourself?
Yeah, well, I think that was a great thing about Elgin Agricultural College. We got to make our wines. Each student had to choose a specific variety. So that goes back to 1977, not a great year, very rainy, very wet year. But officially at Delheim, I was an assistant winemaker appointed for the 1979 vintage. So that was the first official vintage I had as a winemaker. And then from there it just grew to many more. At Delheim for almost 10 years, and then on to Rustenvrede, where it was incredible with the Engelbrecht family to be on such an amazing property, specializing in red wine only.
The Delheim decade, when you look back at that, what were the highlights there for you as a winemaker?
Yeah, Delheim was an incredible classroom for me. I think one underestimates the value that Spat Sperling and the effort that he put into young people. My highlight was that I went to California shortly after joining Delheim and worked at Robert Mondavi Winery with two French winemakers from famous properties in Saint-Emilion. And the mere fact that we sat each day with Robert Mondavi tasting wines with the likes of Paul Hobbs, Zelma Long had just left. But there were incredible people there, and that was the beginning of the famous Opus 1 project, and we happened to be there and be part of that. So those sort of inspiring times set me up to realize that wine was just this amazing thing.
And that travel, spending time with people like Mondavi, getting that exposure, how much did that shape the philosophy and the approach to Kevin Arnold, the winemaker?
Yeah, I think enormously. The fact that, as I always say, once it's in your DNA, you kind of never forget it, because I think great wines are not about thought processes, but more about feelings. And Robert Mondavi made us feel very welcome. We were just little junior kids from around the world in his space, but he was prepared to share everything with us, and he taught us that that you must accept all the challenges. So if you want to make great wine, open all the great wines and see where you fit in. And that's one thing I learned from him, never to not accept the challenge. And it had a profound influence because making wine with small barrels was kind of new to South Africa then. And I could come back and produce the first real classy red wine called the Delheim Grand Reserve in 1981, made in new barrels. It was quite a new thing for the industry in those days.
You then moved on to Rustenvrede. Was it a difficult decision to say goodbye to Delheim and to move over?
It was. I think the Sperling family were really good. It was a winery where we made a lot of different wines. I think a total of 23 different wines, primarily from Chenin Blanc, but they were all called different names. But Rustenvrede was the opportunity to specialize, and somehow the fact that I knew that I just had to specialize and learn how to make good red wine, and I don't think there was a better place to go to than Rustenvrede.
And you also made it with some great characters. The Engelbrechts have always been larger than life, and I think that speaks to a lot of the wine industry. It's full of people who, yes, they make some really good wine, but there are lots of really good people who share, who engage, and who just tend to light your life up.
Exactly, and it's never really changed. I think from the Californian days to the Stellenbosch days, I learned so much from people like Neil Ellis and Jan Boland Coetzee, the late Billy Hofmeyer, who was a journalist, or he won some tasting award, and he would share his incredible collection of wines from Bordeaux, from Spain, from Italy with us. And that was the beginning of the Cape Winemakers Guild, that we, 5 or 6 of us, sat together and tasted great wines when we weren't allowed to sell our wines abroad, but we were tasting them and benchmarking our wines back home in Stellenbosch. And I think this was the real sort of trigger for me, that we had to pitch higher, we had to go for the best. And how does one achieve that? You certainly don't do it on your own. You need great families that are in wine, and you need mentors as well.
And by the time you'd got through that Rustenvrede stage, the experience was considerable. You'd done a lot of really exciting stuff, and you then moved into yet another journey, and that was the start of the Waterford stretch.
Yeah, I think Waterford came about by chance, really, in the sense that the Engelbrecht family were very concise and knew exactly what they wanted, and it didn't really involve any type of partnership, and I just knew that I needed to move to the next challenge. So the partnership at Waterford was exactly that, finding the land, identifying the land, converting a predominantly fruit farm into a wine farm, but also creating a brand from scratch. I enjoyed the marketing side of wine from an early stage in my career, and realized that it was part and parcel of it. And so much so that, you know, what's inside the bottle for us as winemakers is a given. The biggest challenge really is what is outside the bottle, and how do you get to sell that wine? How do you put the message across? And I think Waterford was an opportunity to show everyone that you could start from scratch and build a brand in a short space of time. And both my wife and I were heavily involved in everything that had to do with Waterford, and the design, the look and feel, the planting of the vineyards was my decision. And we then could come up with something in a short space of time and then compete internationally at the very highest level.
You also made some fairly high-profile fans. In fact, I think there's one Irish rock star who's pretty much got Kevin Arnold as his favourite wine person in the world.
Yeah, I suppose realizing that the best place to sell wine was in the vineyards, I created this experience called the Wine Drive, and it enabled us to take high-profile people as well as ordinary South Africans into the vineyard. And it was, yes, one very high-profile guest who spent best part of a day with my daughter and myself up in the vineyards, drinking the wines that we made at Waterford. That was very, very special.
And a long stretch making some terrific wine, a large number of them drunk by my wife, I think is your biggest fan of them all. And now you find yourself out here. It's perhaps a few years ago not where you would have expected to be, and yet it seems like you're still quite excited at this fresh opportunity.
Yeah, I guess that's the amazing thing about wine. I always sort of coined a phrase and said, once a winemaker, always a winemaker. The fact that you live so close to nature and you're in touch with so many wonderful people, I think the wine industry is like a family. And when Chris offered me the opportunity, as did many of the Stellenbosch winemakers offered me opportunity to make wine again, it was, I guess, from a convenience point of view, distance traveling, that Hemel-en-Aarde was just obviously the obvious choice. And yeah, one is excited, even though it's on a very, very small scale, just to get your hands into the grapes, to walk into a cellar and have all the youngsters from all over the world chatting to you, and if you can add some value to their experience, learning in South Africa for them, you know, that's great. And I think Chris embodies all of that, and so it's just been a great few weeks up here with Chris at Hemel-en-Aarde.
And when you look at somebody like Chris, he's such an exciting winemaker in his own right. He's got the young interns you allude to helping him out. Does that both take you back to your days of being in a similar space, but also suggest to you that the next generations of South African winemaking are in pretty good hands?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's changed so dramatically over the decades, and more youngsters from all over the world are discovering the absolute incredible quality that is made in South Africa. And I think that's the way we get the message across, because it comes from within, and it's very much an outside of the bottle experience. And they take that experience back home and share it with everybody. And people like Chris and many of the other winemakers are encouraging the youngsters to come and work. And in fact, more so, I think the youngsters are drawn to these really cool winemakers in South Africa today. And it is about the following generation. So ultimately, the buck doesn't stop with you. It's not really about you. It's about your family. It's about the next generation. It's about the next visionaries. The vineyard continues to grow for years and years, but it needs the kind of people to continue growing with the vineyard.
It's been a remarkable career. I've been blessed to have a little bit of time with you over the years to drink a fair bit of the wine, and there is still more to come. So good luck with this new adventure, and thank you, Kevin Arnold, for everything you have done for South African wine, because it's been considerable.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think you guys, what you do to promote what I call the outside of the bottle story of wine is also amazing. And I think at the end of the day, you know, wine can talk to you from a supermarket shelf or a wine shop shelf, but at the end of the day, it's really the message that is put across by people like yourselves in sharing and encouraging people to try something different. Wine is daunting. I think we have to accept that 99.9% of the people in the world know very little about wine. But how to change that perception is what you do. So thank you for that.
Well, I do it with the help of great people and with great wine. And amongst that wine is the new range of Arnold family wines. Look out for them. It's well worth it.
So that's an update on the Kevin Arnold story. It's a wine fairy tale. Somebody who left a part of the world that didn't really make wine, found himself in Stellenbosch, and has become really one of the defining winemakers of modern South Africa. So lovely to have him on the show, and lovely to see that Arnold Family Wines have got some excitement on the horizon as well. So on to the Potluck Club and the food and wine, but not just the food and wine, because the moment I came in I saw the cocktail list, and one of the cocktails I saw was this. Thai green curry is a cocktail. Now this suggests a very drunk chef at 3 in the morning thinking he can turn a Thai classic into a drink. Does it work, and what's the food like? Well, I am about to find out because Sneh has very kindly delivered me some beetroot carpaccio. Thank you, Sneh. Much appreciated. Thai green curry cocktail. Thank you very much indeed. Now, beetroot carpaccio is something I have quite often. That earthiness of beetroot dressed up with whatever the chef has decided on often gives you quite a substantial meal that makes you feel quite good about yourself. It's full of healthy eating. It's really upmarket compost that my dietitian would approve of. And I'm going to try it first of all because I think my second dish is going to have an even more powerful impact on my palate. Oh, that's lovely. Beautifully fresh, has a nuttiness to it, a little bit of carrot on top, a few radishes thrown in. It is a great combination. So a nice healthy way to kick off an indulgent afternoon at the Potluck Club. What about this cocktail though? What were Luke and Jason thinking? Jason is the group executive chef. Luke is the icon of culinary South Africa. A Thai green curry cocktail. This cannot possibly work, and I'm about to prove it. Here we go. And slightly annoyingly, my theory gets blown out the water because that's actually really cool. It's very different. There's loads of lemongrass, so another blast of freshness, different to this here. You've got some spice to it, there's a little bit of heat. Don't have this if you're not somebody who's up for a curry, but close your eyes, and this really is a Thai green curry reborn as a cocktail. So clearly, they're having a lot of fun at the Potluck Club, and they've created what you'd expect. A menu that's incredibly inventive, both with the food and with the cocktails. And there's a sense of invention to our destination that is up next. This is Elgin, and I was down not too long ago, where some Belgians, and one in particular, has reinvented himself from being a lawyer to a winemaker. Almenkerk is now one of the must-visit destinations on the Elgin wine route, using that cool climate, some Belgian enthusiasm, some great winemakers, and a growing history of delivering some lovely vintages make it somewhere I'm always very happy to drop by. So just as visiting wine estates on Dan's epic wine route has become a fixture for me every year, so particular estates have become places that whenever I'm in the area, I make sure I never miss. And this is one of them for a combination of reasons. Almenkerk has got beautiful views looking down across the valley. There's also some extraordinary wine that gets made every year, but it's also really cool because arguably Belgium's greatest ever export. No, it's not a tennis player, it's not Justine Henin, it's not Jean-Claude Van Damme or Hercule Poirot or Tintin. It's actually this good-looking Clark Kent figure beside me. Joris, lovely to be back at Almenkerk.
Yeah, good to see you, man. I've been tracking you on social media. You've been doing the rounds.
Well, I've been having some adventures, and I'm very glad that we are back here and able to share your story, which is such a fun story. For people who don't know the background, remind us of how this Belgian accountant type finds himself making wine here in Elgin.
Not accountant. I actually studied law in Belgium. And people say when you studied law you can do anything, but winemaking is not included in that ambit. And yeah, we came to South Africa in 2002, bought a farm in 2004 with the great idea of starting a wine farm, except that there wasn't a single vine on this farm. It was an apple area. Elgin is a cool climate. It's great for viticulture, but it's essentially an apple area. So we had to pull out about 28 hectares of apple trees and plant a bit of vines. We've got 15 hectares of vines and 15 hectares of apples right now. And yeah, first wine was 2009, just after building the cellar here. And yeah, we've been doing well. We've been winning some prizes, getting some critical acclaims, and slowly getting our name out there.
Hey, you've done something that many people dream of, becoming a winemaker, becoming somebody who makes your own wine. People have got different reasons for having that dream. What was yours? What was the inspiration for you guys to do this?
Yeah, look, we we were always into wine, even as students. Both Natalie and I grew up in the hospitality business, so there was always wine around. And as students, we joined the wine society, and that's sort of where I cottoned onto the idea that wine tasting and wine drinking was something that I really enjoyed. And the wine tasting and drinking morphed into wine making. I got an opportunity to come and do a harvest in South Africa at Rawsonville, and that's where I learned my Afrikaans the rough way, and then ended up buying a piece of land with the help of the family, of course, and that was in 2004. Converted it and started making wine. So there's a 4-year wait after planting vines and getting your first crop. So I used those 4 years to go and study viticulture and winemaking here in Stellenbosch, which was a really fun time, I must say.
And the timing of this was auspicious because you guys have grown up as a brand at much the same time as Elgin has grown up as a wine region and gone from having I think there were a couple of vines at Oak Valley.
You think that's a coincidence?
I think you're the
There's
genesis
a correlation
of all of this.
there. There must be a correlation there.
You have brought Elgin together,
Yeah.
Joris.
No, what happened is in 2003, 2004, the apple business was in a serious slump. And they ended up selling a lot of apple farms. And many of these farms were sold to Stellenbosch wine farmers. And that's where it started. They pulled out the apple trees, planted vines. We went from less than 400 hectares up to over 1,000 hectares of vineyards planted. And Elgin became a wine growing area. And we're doing it extremely well as an area. We do less than 2% of South Africa's wine production. Yet you go to any restaurant in South Africa and other places in the world, and we're on the wine list. You'll find 4, 5, 6 different wines from Elgin in the top restaurants of South Africa, despite only making such a tiny quantity. So that must say something about the quality of wine we make.
It does indeed. I think it also says something about the quality of winemakers. So you can take a little credit there as well. And it's very easy to look at that now and look at the story, and it sounds all romantic and full of destiny. But it's doubtless been a journey that has had its challenges. What have been the biggest challenge for you in building up this new life and building up this brand?
Oh, good question, Dan. I think one challenge is being a foreigner. Coming into a farming community. That's been quite challenging for us. Luckily we had kids, and then once the kids start going to school, you meet parents at the school gates and you start integrating into the community. That was a real challenge. And then working with staff, it's never easy, and it's not a South African problem per se. My mother runs a restaurant in Belgium and she encounters the exact same problems we do. And then it's getting your name out there. Yes, there's branding and there's advertising, but there's also you also have to be around for long enough to be regarded as a brand, and that's what we're slowly chipping away at.
So you've overcome those challenges by and large, or at least learned to deal with them, and that's led to many of your successes. We can look on and see a sticker on a bottle or a great accolade from a wine critic, but what is the triumph, the success that has meant the most to you guys?
Look, for me personally, it's the recognition you get from your peers. It's if I sit with another winemaker and I show him my wine and he says, "Oh, this is a really sharp wine," or "Yeah, I really, really enjoy this wine," then to me personally that means more than a medal or a rating in a wine magazine. So
that's really nice to hear that, and I think it speaks to this kind of camaraderie amongst our winemakers. And not only do you give each other this kind of credit, but you learn a lot from each other, and you share understandings of what you make, and that's what I'd like you to do with me. I've got a couple of bottles here, just to give me a sense of how this particular terroir, as well as just looking lovely, is also able to give us such great wine.
Well, look, we've touched on the cool climate, and that definitely helps. We've got the diurnal variation in temperature, so cool nights and nice and warm, balmy days. We've got the fact that the winters are really cold, which helps the Chardonnay a lot. And in fact, the Chardonnay is planted on the lowest site on the farm where two slopes converge, so all the cold air sort of gets trapped there. And being such a cold site, it is the one spot on the farm where we're guaranteed to get frost every winter. And Chardonnay needs that. As a grape variety, it has one of the highest cold requirements. of all grape varieties. So it needs that call to bud again the next season and be fertile. So it's a really unique site in that sense. And the same can be said for the Merlot. Merlot tends to be green in South Africa, and to get rid of that greenness, you need exposure to sunlight. So we use a nice south-facing gravelly slope so it doesn't get wet feet, and it's nice and cool, so we can hang it for a bit longer, and then we'll do leaf plucking and exposing the bunches to sunlight and removing the shoulders of all the bunches, so we only use the main bunch that ripens earlier than the shoulders. And by doing that, we get rid of that greenness.
You've got 15 hectares here of grapes. You've mentioned a couple of varietals already. You've got quite a wide range, and Elgin has led the countercharge to the Hemel-en-Aarde with some wonderful Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but there is so much more to it. How difficult is it for you in striking a balance between these are the grapes we're really, really good at, but there's also only so much you can eventually make?
Look, let's be honest, when we first came here, we didn't really have an idea what we were doing. So we got some consultants in, as one does. You follow the advice of 3 consultants, you get 4 opinions, and you still have to decide which one to follow. So we ended up planting 8 different varieties, and the goal was always, after 10 years of winemaking, we were going to narrow the range down to what we knew we could do well. So yes, we used to have a lot of wines, but we've culled some from our range, and now we focus mainly on Sauvignon Blanc, because it's a cool climate area, and we make quite exceptional Sauvignon Blanc, beautiful acidities. We do Chardonnay because of the winter chill and the cold nights, and the fact that Elgin simply makes the best Chardonnays in South Africa. And then we do Merlot because Merlot needs that extra hang time. It needs that cool, prolonged ripening to get rid of that greenness, and that's something that we can only pull off in Elgin. So Merlot is just so exceptional in this area. It is one of the few areas in South Africa where we can get it really right.
Oh, I think it was the Mount Bullet from just down the road that became the first kind of cult Merlot we had.
There we go.
In Africa.
Yes, yeah.
Now there are a lot of you making some great stuff. You've also got something I tried a little earlier on today for the first time. If you're looking at these grapes, perhaps and wondering what they are, these are Cabernet Sauvignon, nice and small and tight and bursting with flavour. But you haven't used these to make Cabernet Sauvignon. You've got a rosé instead.
Yes, yeah. So for 2 reasons. It actually started off as a bit of a failed experiment, in the sense that the block was planted right next to what was a tiny dam when we bought it. And as it turned out, the previous owner was selling his orchard to the neighboring farm every year. And when we closed that tap, literally, the dam just started getting bigger and bigger, to the point where it started encroaching on our Cabernet Sauvignon block. And this was obviously in springtime when the vines were budding. Those first 4 rows had access to that soil water from the dam, and they would grow. I mean, you give a vine water, it just grows. So they're way too vigorous, it's overshadowing the bunch zone. So we thought we can never make red wine from this. Let's use those 4 rows to make a bit of rosé. And that was a tiny little project that just completely got out of control. It was so popular, we made 8 rows the next year, and then we doubled it again the year after. And now most of the Cabernet is being used to make this rosé. It's bone dry, it's savory, and it's actually being made today at the cellar. So
auspicious timing for us. It's the latest part of this wine-making story, and it's one that never really ends, because wine is in a constant sense of evolution for so many reasons. That notwithstanding, what do you think that the next stretch holds for Almenkerk? Where would you like to take the estate and the brand, and what are those winemaking itches you still need to scratch?
So we've done quite a bit on the front of sustainability. I know it's a bit of a buzzword, so I'll explain to you what it means for us. We've banned all herbicides. We're using a lot of biological products. We don't use any harmful products to bees and humans. And we are safeguarding about 18% of our estate to regenerating the indigenous fauna and flora. We've introduced mycorrhiza, so bacteria and fungi, into the soil to regenerate the soil health. We are using green compost. We are basically allowing weeds, selected weeds, to grow underneath the vines, increasing the rhizosphere, the root zones where soil life thrives. And by doing that, we've increased the health of our vines, increased the vigor of our vines, but most of all, we've increased their buffer capacity to diseases and to drought. So now we've got stronger vines that just tend to make better wines.
It's just hard to imagine because they're already in such a great space. I love them. I'm a big fan. You're well aware of this. I am interested, though, before we wrap up and go into a bit more tasting, I'm interested to know how these go down back in Belgium, because you're now very much South African. There's definitely a tinge of Afrikaans accent coming through there. I always imagined Belgium to be a very much a beer drinking culture.
Absolutely,
and,
absolutely. But Dan, you'd be surprised how much beer and coffee it takes to make good wine.
What's the popularity like of this? Am I likely to find
Look,
Almenkerk
Belgium is
in
our
Belgium?
biggest export market. In fact, we export more wine to Belgium than we sell anywhere else in the world.
Sure.
Yeah, and it does very well there. Obviously, there's the USP that we have, that we are from Belgium, and I'm sure part of it is that we go 2-3 times a year to help and sell the wine. But I also like to think that it's the quality of the wine that helps sell it. Yeah?
I think it has to be a big story. Ernie Els often speaks of when he got into wine, he could sell the first vintage because he was Ernie Els, but the second vintage had to be because the wine was good. So your first vintage might have been because you're Belgian, second one had to be because the wine was good, and that's what it certainly is.
Thank you for that.
Magic.
Cheers.
Well, thank you for the time. Thank you for having me back here. It's an estate just off the main drag as you come through Elgin and Grappo, and you can come just for the views and you'll certainly enjoy them. But what you really want to do is come out here, drink some wine, and discover that Belgium's greatest export is continuing a wonderful trend. So that is the wine of Almenkerk, and in fact I have got some here. You can see how much the Belgians are enjoying themselves in South Africa, and that translates into very enjoyable wine. The Sauvignon Blanc from the cool climate, the acid is there, but it's not going to take the enamel off your teeth. And there are a couple of dishes here, the fish slider in particular, that go really well. Also worked out quite nicely with the piri-piri chicken, which I found really, really good. And then there is also the Syrah Merlot blend from Almenkerk, 2 red varietals. They do particularly well. And what I love about this is you can chill it just a touch, and it offers you a wine that's a really good counterpoint to some of the hotter, slightly spicier dishes that they have on this menu. And there is that Asian flavor that comes through in a lot of what is a really cool menu. There's also a wine list that's got all manner of interest and excitement. There's stuff from Kumusha Tinashe, who was so involved for so many years with Luke Del Roberts. They've got some of the Restless River Cabernet Sauvignon from 2019. They've got some Kevin Arnold on here. They've got a whole range of wine to play through and to pair off with the different dishes they have. But come along and explore, run through the wine list, run through the menu as well, and try and work out what to leave out. That's really your challenge when dining at Luke Del Roberts, the Potluck Club. So that's it for this week. A big thank you to Kevin Arnold for joining us, and to the team at Almenkerk. And next time you're looking for somewhere to grab a bite in Johannesburg, a heart of Rosebank, the Potluck Club, loads of small plates, a great wine list, cool environment, and very warm welcome, you'll be onto a winner. Cheers.